Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now taking orders on our Q3 2024 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session.
Hey there guys, welcome back to another guide with yours truly, Paul Reisman, teaching assistant here at Ruler School TCG. Today we are taking a look at Utsunes, one of the new rulers from Thoth of the Trinity. I've been playing this ruler a lot and doing a lot of different things with her to try and figure out how exactly do I begin to play this deck. And let me tell you, this ruler has a lot of depth. I did not expect this to be so difficult or take so much time to actually get me to the point where I'm at now. And I feel like I'm still exploring this ruler in a lot of ways. So this guide is being put together after a lot of experience with the ruler and just trying to figure out where to take her next. So if you're interested in this ruler and you're like, I have no idea how to play this and I've never seen anyone pilot a deck in order to make this actually happen, this is the guide for you. So here's a brief introduction to Utsunes. She's a wind ruler with an affinity for the remnant mechanic and manipulating the remove from game zone to her advantage. In more ways than one, I might add. Remnant is an ability that says you may play this card from your graveyard. So this card has to have the ability Remnant in order for you to actually use this ability. If you played this card from your graveyard by Remnant, if this card would move from the chase area to anywhere else, remove it from the game instead. That's incredibly important to recognize because that means any resonator that you have with Remnant that is placed on the chase by its remnant effect is then removed from the game instead of coming into the field. They may not seem very intuitive for newer players or players who are like, this seems like a really cool ruler, let me pick this up. Remnant says if it goes from the chase to anywhere else, it's removed from the game instead. But don't worry, Utsunes has ways to get around that stipulation. Because even though the CR is very much not seeming like it's in her favor, she has ways to get around that. So because of this interaction with the CR, Utsunes support has different ways and nuances to play her as a ruler. There's a lot of interesting interactive places that you go with this particular ruler, and I think it really helps you understand sort of the different zones in Force of Will as a whole. So let's talk about the Green Witch herself. This is Utsunes, phosphorescent priestess, who judgments into Remnatheos Utsunes. Remnatheos is the god of remnants. So she's basically the god of her own world, and she manipulates time and the different locations of the field in order to create her own world. In a lot of ways, she's a kind of an analog for the player herself, themself, himself, however you identify. Basically, she's you, and she gets very meta very quickly, so let's just kind of avoid this. Basically, if we're going to break her down very quickly, she fixes your will. So your time equals green will, and your green will equals time will. This opens up a few interesting avenues for you to go in. She's also really good because your remnant spells cantrip, all of them. If they're resonators, if they're chants, if they're additions, if they have remnant and you're casting them from the graveyard, you will be drawing an additional card. And that's not once per turn, that's anytime you do it. She also gives Aradia, Heaven of Aeon, Eternal, which is also very relevant. We'll take a look at that card next up in the lineup here. And she gets cheaper for all of the time beasts expelled from the game with different names. If you don't know what time beasts are, I will get there. That's kind of my name for them. It's a little bit easier than trying to say something else that has a lot of text associated with it. If you do flip her and she is a J ruler, you can pull Time Beast from the RFG with a discard up to twice per turn. And then she herself gains Eternal as a result of being flipped, and she's a 10/10 body, which is certainly nothing to scoff at. It's very powerful to have Eternal in general. So, we mentioned Aradia, Heaven of Aeon. This is that card. So what's really interesting about this card is this is the world that Utsunes is creating with her time magic. So basically this world and everything else in it is the result of her magic. So this is the main way that the deck discards cards that are in your hand, and it cycles your combo pieces from deck into hand very often. It has mythics, so you can't be doing this for everything and getting multiple instances of it. This card is pretty good, so we don't want to give you too much of an advantage here, right? So it has mythic, but it also gains that really nice enter effect when it enters, and whenever something enters the field from your removed area, keep that in mind. All your time beasts are going to come in from your removed area, and that will mean that this card cantrips, which is really helpful in cycles cards. This also has Forgotten Forest of Fossils in addition to its other names, which means it can be recruited by another one of Utsune's combo pieces, which is Titanophil. This card is going to be really useful to grab with that resonator in particular. You'll see what I mean when I get there. But this card can be recruited, that's the most important thing. This also gives all of your time beasts remnant, and it can also protect them on the chase. That can be really, really helpful. Basically, time beasts, as we get into it, are referring to resonators with time in their will attribute cost. So there are 4, I believe actually 5 resonators with time in their attribute costs. All of them belong to Utsunes with the exception of maybe one that's a little bit more flexible, but that's neither here nor there. Leo Aatrox is here as an example, and he has a lot of different effects on him, but basically they all say you can play this card if you control a Werebeast J Ruler. Utsunes is a Werebeast. I know she doesn't look like it, but she is a Werebeast J Ruler, so you can discard another beast to play this card for 1 time less if you wish to. This card would be put into the graveyard from the field, expel it instead. As you might note, this is a time beast, and it's one of the names contributing to Utsunes becoming cheaper to perform judgment, right? All of these have different enter effects. I'm going to skip those for the moment. But when this card is removed from the game by anywhere by its remnant ability, doesn't have natural remnant. That's what we have Aradia to give it remnant. Or if it is removed from the game by a card with the effect of remnant, we'll get to that as well. There's a card that can utilize this. You can put this card from your RFG into the field. This triggers its enter ability, which is destroy target resonator with total cost 2 or less. This is mandatory, but you can also target itself. Sometimes that is relevant if you want this card to pop itself to be removed so that Utsunes can become cheaper. That's really helpful. Its companions also gain counters, which I believe is Remnatherian Taurus. Gets larger for each beast in your graveyard and RFG, which is really, really helpful. And then the Wolf variant of this card gets rid of additions. And if it does pop an addition, you can mill 2 cards into the graveyard. Can be really helpful for certain variants of the deck. But for the most part, the time beasts are sort of the things that live in Aradia, and so she's able to summon these things and bring them to the fore, whether they're in the graveyard or whether they are in the RFG. She is able to bring them onto the field. So these don't have remnant inherently, but that's why you play Aradia. Very good card. Helps these cards come into the field a little bit more reliably, and of course, when you play them with remnant, Utsunes will see that you did, and they will draw you a card, and when they come in from the RFG, Aradia will see that they arrived and allow you to cycle. So there's a lot of value here just off these first 3 pieces of the deck. Titanophil is next. This boy is huge, and this is the reason I actually wanted to learn how to play the deck. I saw this guy, and my inner Timmy just went, big old Chungus, come in, remove all resonators from the game. Seems pretty good. So this is your main recruiter for the deck, and it gets all of your forgotten spells that are in the deck, including all the different pieces that are used to get him. Forgotten Discovery, Forgotten Memory, and I forget the last one, but basically they're all pieces of him that all have remnant and all do different things. If they're RFG'd, you can expel them to cheat him into the field if something else leaves the field. Very powerful in a sense, just cheating out a big old guy that removes all resonators from the game. Gets around Eternal, gets around Barrier. This thing, the longer you look at it and the more you consider its implications, the better it looks. So I was really drawn to him, first of all. So this also means that you can recruit Aradia, Heaven of Aeon, because its continuous effect gives it a forgotten name, which means he can search it, which is really, really helpful. The 3 win chance help make up his body, and he can also recruit those into your hand. And this is immune to pretty much anything that targets in any place. I'm calling this Super Barrier because it's not just when it's on the field it can't be targeted. It can't be targeted or removed from the grave as long as it's public in any way. That means if it's on the field, if it's on the chase, if it's in the graveyard, if it's in the RFG for some reason, it cannot be targeted and it cannot be removed at all, as long as it's public. So that means when you give this card Remnant and put it onto the chase, it will not be removed by the Remnant effect. It'll just come into the field instead. This is what I mean by you need to understand how Remnant works, because this guy can get around Remnant and how it works in some pretty ingenious ways. So this guy is definitely the version of the deck that I went. Titanophil is very fun, and I love him. I just love that he comes in and he's just, you're gone. His flavor text, you were warned. It's like, what did you unearth? What were you doing? Now you're dead. This guy is honestly very fantastic, and I love it. The other card we need to talk about today, and the card that I didn't really lean into too much in my initial builds here, but I might experiment more with in the future, is the Horn God of Aradia. Remember, Aradia is the place where Utsunes is creating this stuff with her time magic. The Horned God of Aradia is one of the gods of that location. And so you can play this in a fire version of the deck that can use the time beasts a little bit more. You can remove them from the grave as a card with Remnant. He will then trigger the abilities of all those time beasts. They will enter the field, and you'll go from there for the most part, right? You'll be popping additions, popping 2 costs. You'll be gaining a bunch of counters, and you'll have a really robust field presence. And it also fuels the judgment cost reduction more consistently because you're putting them onto the field, and if they get removed from the field, the time beast will then turn down the cost of Utsune's judgment effect. So that's really, really, really helpful in that way. And so this card is very, very interesting for that reason. He also gains a couple of abilities if you control an Aradia J/ruler. Turns out Utsunes is also an Aradia ruler, so that's really, really helpful. So getting into some other helpful support, you might need things that help you to discard. These allow you to unclog your hand from the remnant spells that you have in your hand. All of the different pieces for Titanophil, his skull, his ribcage, his ankles, all of those need to be in the grave at some point so they can get RFG'd and they can fuel Titanophil later on in the game. This is really helpful in control variants, so cards like Falchion, Shooting Star of Water, very helpful, just infinite discard from your hand. Wall of Terror is also really helpful, just giving things barrier for the cost of discarding a card from your hand can be really, really useful. I personally prefer Falchion. I think Falchion just puts on a lot more pressure than Wall of Terror. So that can be really useful, but there might be other variants that want to use Wall of Terror for more control, more keeping things on the field, keeping them sticky, that sort of thing. There are also mill options. Certain variations of the deck might approve of things going to the graveyard from the deck instead of from the hand. So things like Death Speaker Monk are very helpful to be able to toss something into the graveyard and then allow things to mill into the graveyard relatively easy. Time Beast will be really good in the control combo variants. Solarization support also goes really well with this variation of the deck in either direction. Solarization cards like Replicant Kaguya, Sword of Progression, and Liberation of Winds alongside Replicant Shiva are a pretty natural fit because you are removing a lot of cards from the game, either due to Remnant or because of other effects like the Horn God of Aradia. So that can be really helpful as well. Titanophil, if you bring him into the field and you end up removing some things, it can be really helpful to just be able to reutilize those and shuffle those back into the deck, completing the cycle that Utsunes otherwise is creating. You also want to look at other strong generic wind support. In particular, I really do like Priscia and Priscia's Big Show. That card in particular is really good for just cycling through the top cards of your deck with 4C and then fueling a late game push, especially in control variants. That can be really, really good. In control variants, Titanophil is very hard to deal with because he has Super Barrier, and he also removes all of the other resonators on the field from the game. You do not hurt not nearly as badly as your opponent will if your resonators get removed from the game, because they might just come back, which is really, really helpful. Because of that, he's also very resistant to Sealing Stone of Iga, which is one of the more popular cards right now in the metagame. Leon is really well known for using this card and doing it quite consistently. Sealing Stone cannot remove Titanophil from the field because of his super barrier in his clause that says he cannot be removed from the game if he's in a public zone. And he also cannot be removed by any other means, including his remnant processes, so don't forget that. However, this version of the deck can struggle against aggression, and it needs to utilize removal. It can cycle its resources relatively easily. However, you need to be careful because that can take a long time at times. It's a really slow-paced deck, and it can be a little bit will efficient. If you are just playing Titanophil to kind of get back into the game, sometimes you might just completely tap out on stones, which in this game is rarely a good idea. But sometimes you can play Titanophil, and your opponent will have nothing they can do to stop you from playing him. He's just that good. This variant is also very weak to Mirror because Aradia is a 1 cost, so Mirror can be quite strong against both versions of this deck, but we're going to talk about the combo variant too. This version, I think, can mostly lean more into fire and play more of the Time Beasts along with the Horn God of Aradia, and it focuses more on flipping Utsunes into her J-Ruler form. She's really hard to get rid of once she's there. She's not quite as sticky as Titanophil, but that might just be sticky enough. Titanophil seems to be even more overkill in some ways, just because it's even harder to get rid of him in a variety of ways. But you also get access to a really powerful remnant spell in the effect of Sympathy of Fire and Wind. This is really good, especially if it's already in the graveyard. It'll allow you to ramp a stone. If you play it from your hand, though, you can deal some burn damage, which is really useful to sort of bring your opponent down a little bit in terms of their life, and this allows you to be a little bit more aggressive, especially as you put stronger and stronger resonators on the field. Because of your natural affinity with fire, Replicant Shiva becomes even more consistently achievable, and it's also something that can cycle your remnant spells like Sympathy of Fire and Wind back into the deck to reuse later. Again, Utsunes cycles cards from the RFG very, very well, especially with all of the solarization support. This can probably play very well into field heavy decks, into formats where If your opponent is sticking things on the board, Utsunes can really take advantage of that with all of the time beasts, especially Leo Aatrox, and it plays really well into addition heavy formats as well. And so there's a lot of value to this deck. I'm gonna be trying it out here very soon myself, but in theory and on paper, this deck looks very fun and very interesting. Hopefully we can bring that to you in a later Ruler's School deck profile and video. Other than that, guys, if you have any questions, let us know down in the comment section down below. This is the second of our guides. The first one was on Lucy, so if you haven't seen that list or that guide, make sure to go back in our different videos here on Ruler's School TCG on YouTube so that you can see those different videos as well. If you have other ideas for other guides, let us know down in the comments as well. While you're down there, hit that like button if you like this kind of video. We're trying something a little bit new with these more complicated rulers, kind of giving you a guide so you feel a little bit more comfortable playing them. And if there are any other rulers, I would love to do a guide on those as I experiment with this game that I absolutely love. Anyway, guys, this has been Paul, teaching assistant here at Ruler School TCG. It's been a pleasure, and until next time, class is dismissed.